Thanksgiving morning. Just as I was setting the table for two, I'm divorced. Long story, my daughter looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're not coming to the wedding." Dad, you've done enough. That was it. No warning. No explanation. Just those 6 words. And she didn't even flinch when she said them. By December 12th, I had lost access to my Fidelity investment portfolio. The 78-foot yacht I'd kept moored in Newport Beach for 10 years. And worst of all, my name had been quietly removed from the deed to my own home. Let that sink in. I'm Richard Bellamy. I'm 68 years old. Retired founder and former CEO of a clean energy tech firm I started from a garage in San Jose. I sold the company for $32 million 6 years ago and thought I was entering a peaceful retirement surrounded by family. What a fantasy. Because the people I trusted most, my daughter Madison and her husband Brian, had a different plan for my retirement. And I only realized it when it was almost too late. If you've ever been blindsided by family greed, drop your city in the comments and hit that subscribe button, because I'm about to walk you through every betrayal, every forged document, every drop of poison disguised as care. What they didn't know, I kept everything. Emails, transaction logs, even a sealed envelope marked, "Do not open, except on advice of counsel." I'll explain what's in that envelope later. But first, let me tell you how this all began. Back when I still believed I was the one in control. Part 2. The years I gave them everything. Looking back now, I don't know when the giving turned into enabling. I guess it happened so gradually I didn't notice. I missed a lot of holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, even one of Madison's college recitals because I was building something. Working double shifts in the early days. Pitching investors by day. Coding late into the night. But I always told myself it was for her. So she wouldn't have to fight like I did. She went to Stanford. I paid every penny of the tuition. 4 years. Plus room and board. Plus her semester abroad in Italy. Then came her first car. A silver Lexus. She didn't even know she wanted until it showed up in the driveway with a bow on top. When she got engaged to Brian, I paid for the wedding venue deposit before he'd even proposed. Brian. Where do I begin? He was always friendly. Always polite. But never quite capable. Never quite reliable. He bounced between startup gigs and consulting jobs that never lasted more than a few months. I'd hear words like NFT launch and Web3 branding, and I'd nod politely. But the truth, Madison carried the weight financially. Or rather, I did. Because when Madison wanted something, I gave it. I funded their first condo near the water. Helped cover their fertility treatments. Even bailed out Brian's failed social media agency twice. They always framed it as temporary support. Said they'd pay me back once they got stabilized. They never did. But I didn't keep track out of spite. I kept track because I believed in transparency. I had a folder called Family Ledger on my desktop with every expense, every deposit, every favor, just in case. They called me controlling. I called it protection. So when Brian asked for limited power of attorney to help streamline financial decisions on our shared investments, I didn't blink. He framed it as a formality just in case I got sick or couldn't sign something quickly. And I signed it. One signature. That's all it took to set the trap. I didn't know it then. But that was the day I handed them the keys to everything I'd built. And they couldn't wait to use them against me. After I signed that power of attorney, things didn't fall apart right away. No, what they did was much smarter than that. They drifted. The first shift was subtle. Madison stopped calling me Dad and started calling me Richard in emails. Just businesslike enough to sound cold. Brian started handling more of our joint investment paperwork, even the ones I hadn't asked him to touch. He said it was easier for tax season. Then came the missed calls. At first, they blamed the baby. Madison was finally pregnant. They were busy. Doctor's appointments. Sleep schedules. New parent chaos. I understood. Or I thought I did. but the invitations stopped coming. 2. No more family barbecues at their place. No more last-minute dinners when I was in town. One weekend, I even drove all the way to Malibu just to surprise them. They weren't home. I left a note in the mailbox. No one ever mentioned it. Meanwhile, Brian started asking for small favors. Just a quick loan to cover a property tax payment. Just a temporary transfer while he sorted out his PayPal account. I'd wired him $25,000 before I realized he hadn't paid me back for the previous 10. Still, I didn't confront him. I told myself, it's fine. He's my son-in-law. They're family. But what really scared me, the moment I realized I had no access to my Fidelity dashboard, locked out. The email said my credentials had changed due to a security update. I called the help desk. They told me the email on file was no longer mine. A new one had been added just 2 weeks earlier. I asked who authorized the change. They said, someone with power of attorney. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to a stranger read me my own name like I was someone else's patient. That was when I knew. Something had been moving underneath my life. Quietly, like a current pulling me off the shore while I thought I was still standing. I went back through my records. My Tesla stock had been partially liquidated. Nearly $100,000 gone. Madison told me she needed help covering hospital bills. I never saw an invoice. And then the biggest shock, my name was no longer listed as sole owner of the Newport Beach property. It had been quietly transferred into a trust. A trust I hadn't created. I called my attorney. Carter. A man I'd trusted for 15 years. His office said he was no longer with the firm. When I asked for his replacement, the receptionist gave me the name of someone I didn't know. Turns out it was Brian's old college roommate. I remember staring at the wall in my kitchen that night. Lights dimmed. Hands shaking. Realizing they had been preparing for this. This wasn't random. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was planned, coordinated, executed with precision. And the worst part, I gave them the blueprint. I taught Madison how to manage risk. I showed Brian how to structure accounts. Every lesson I thought would prepare them for life. They turned around and used it against me. And I still wasn't ready for what came next. Because betrayal doesn't always show up in one dramatic moment. Sometimes it's paperwork. Sometimes it's silence. And sometimes it's a calendar invite you never receive for a court hearing with your name at the top. It started with a letter I nearly threw away. The envelope was one of those heavy, cream-colored legal mailers. Looked like a catalog or something from my HOA. I was already halfway to the trash when I saw the return address, County Probate Court. My heart started hammering. Inside was a formal notice hearing to establish conservatorship over Richard Bellamy. Date 2 weeks from now. They were trying to declare me legally incompetent. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands, reading it over and over. It didn't make sense. I hadn't missed a mortgage. I hadn't fallen behind on taxes. I wasn't sick. But according to this paperwork, I was exhibiting signs of diminished mental capacity. There was even an attached affidavit from someone claiming to be my physician. I had never seen that doctor in my life. And the signature, it wasn't mine. At least, not one I remembered signing. I called Madison. She didn't answer. Called Brian. Straight to voicemail. I wasn't just being cut off from my accounts anymore. I was being erased. The next day, I drove straight to the courthouse and requested access to the full petition. I couldn't believe what I saw. Brian and Madison had submitted 3 documents. The first, a psychiatric assessment from a telehealth provider I'd never spoken to, dated 3 months earlier, claiming I was prone to confusion and delusional about finances. The second was a notarized declaration from Brian, stating I had recently lost track of basic dates and conversations, and was no longer fit to handle high-value assets. And the third, an email chain between Brian and my new attorney, Carter's so-called replacement, suggesting that the window to establish control before Richard notices is closing. Those were his exact words. Before Richard notices, I felt sick. Not because they lied, but because they were so confident I wouldn't fight back. I called the pharmacy next. Curious about the medication mix-up I'd brushed off weeks earlier. They confirmed that my usual prescription had been changed to a generic substitute with double the dosage. Prescribed by the same doctor from the affidavit. It all connected. The brain fog I'd blamed on age, the headaches, the short-term memory lapses. They'd been manipulating my medication. The final piece came from Maria, my longtime housekeeper. She remembered a man coming by, claiming to be from Medicare, asking about my benefits and recent doctor visits. He said he was following up on a capacity evaluation. That man, she confirmed it was Brian, and suddenly, all the missing links snapped into place. They hadn't just cut me off financially. They were building a case slowly, methodically, so that by the time I realized what was happening, they'd already boxed me out legally, medically, and socially. They'd prepped the courtroom, planted the paperwork, and rerouted every call I might make for help. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a quiet coup, and I knew if I didn't act fast, I wouldn't just lose my assets. I'd lose my name, my voice, my agency. Everything I'd spent my life building would belong to them. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot, because the man they thought they could silence, he still had one thing they hadn't stolen. Proof. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than usual. He hadn't slept much. My mind was racing, but not with fear anymore. With clarity, for the first time in months. The fog was gone. Whatever Brian had switched in my meds had finally worked its way out of my system. My thinking was sharp again. I made coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I was done reacting. Now, I was going to investigate, and what I uncovered that morning, it changed everything. This is what I call the three-layer revelation. Layer 1, the surface. What was happening right now? I had been served notice for a conservatorship hearing scheduled 2 weeks out. My own daughter and son-in-law had filed affidavits claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my affairs. They'd gone as far as forging a medical diagnosis to back it up, and I had no legal representation on file. No scheduled testimony. No advocate. They were hoping I wouldn't even show up. Layer 2, the conspiracy. Who else was involved? First, I pulled up the property records for my house in Newport Beach. Ownership had quietly been transferred into a new family trust. I hadn't authorized that, and I certainly hadn't signed the transfer papers, but someone had. I compared the signature on the deed with my own. It was close, but not close enough. The pen pressure was off. The loop on the R didn't match. The spacing was unnatural. Then I remembered something. About 3 months earlier, Madison had brought over a stack of documents from the accountant. She said it was just routine tax paperwork. Asked me to sign the bottom 3 pages. I didn't read them. Turns out, one of those pages was the trust transfer. And who was the notary? A friend of Brian's from his last failed startup. I kept digging. Found emails between Brian and my former estate attorney's replacement, the college roommate. They talked in code. But one line stood out. The judge leans our way if we stay clean. Don't leave a digital trail. Too late. Layer 3, the timeline. How long it had been happening. I opened up my email archives, pulled my phone records, went through bank statements, Amazon purchases, even Ring camera logs. Everything had a pattern. 18 months earlier, right around the time I gave Brian limited power of attorney, they started laying the groundwork. There was a new Gmail account created using my full name with 1 extra period in it. That's the account tied to my new Fidelity login. There were pharmacy pickups logged under my insurance for medications I'd never taken starting 11 months ago. A new Medicare form had been filed, changing my listed provider to the fake doctor 9 months back. I had even been removed from the board of my own foundation. The email went to spam. The vote passed without me. I was being unpersoned. One document at a time. I leaned back in my chair, just staring at the screen. My mouth was dry. My hands were ice cold. I looked around my house quiet, perfectly still, and realized how dangerously close I'd come to disappearing in plain sight. That's when I stood up, walked to the cabinet above the fridge, and pulled down the envelope. It was thick, sealed, labeled in bold black marker. Do not open except on advice of counsel. Inside was everything they didn't know I had. Copies of my original will, the untouched trust, recordings of conversations, email backups, transaction logs. I had always believed in keeping hard copies. Even in a digital world, it wasn't paranoia. It was protection. And now, it was my ammunition. Because I was done being the one who got erased. Now, it was their turn to panic. The day after I opened that envelope, I made exactly 3 phone calls. The first was to Maria, my housekeeper of nearly 15 years. I asked if she remembered the day Brian came pretending to be with Medicare. She did. Even described the khaki shirt he was wearing and how he avoided eye contact when she asked him questions. The second call was to Chase Bank's fraud division. The third was to Elaine Callahan. Elaine is what you might call a legal wrecking ball. A former federal prosecutor turned elder law specialist. I met her once at a charity fundraiser years ago and kept her card just in case. This was the case. I didn't rage. I didn't throw a fit. I handed her the envelope. She skimmed the contents, then leaned back and gave me a long look. They picked the wrong retiree, she said. And from that moment, we went to war. The first step was freezing everything. Elaine filed an emergency motion with the court to suspend the conservatorship petition and place a temporary freeze on all trust-controlled accounts. We submitted affidavits, attached Maria's statement, pharmacy logs, IP address histories, showing unauthorized logins from Brian's devices. We tracked every transaction using timestamps and metadata, exactly how much had been siphoned out, where it went, and when. Over $243,000 moved in under 14 months. But the bigger problem, the trust transfer of the Newport Beach house, they hadn't just altered paperwork, they'd filed it through the county. Legally. That house no longer belonged solely to me. But we had proof it was done with a forged signature and a biased notary. Elaine filed a civil claim for real estate fraud. That same afternoon, she sent cease and desist letters to Carter's former firm and Brian's fake legal partner. Then we called Fidelity. I reclaimed my account with a notarized affidavit and identity check. They flagged the activity as unauthorized access under elder financial exploitation and reported it to the SEC. That evening, Brian got served in public. He was having brunch at Soho House in Malibu with a few startup buddies. A process server handed him a thick stack of papers and a flash drive. Inside that drive, every login, every document, every forgery. No one said a word. But a few phones came out. Someone recorded it. We didn't stop there. Elaine filed a complaint with the California Bar against Carter's replacement for unethical conduct, conspiracy, and breach of fiduciary duty. Then we went federal, under California Penal Code Section 368. We filed a formal elder abuse complaint citing financial fraud, medical manipulation, and attempted identity theft. The DA took the case seriously. Meanwhile, I took a small personal step. I contacted the marine nonprofit I'd quietly supported for years and signed over the yacht. Gone. Just like that. I didn't want Brian thinking he could ever set foot on it again. Then I posted the deed transfer publicly on LinkedIn with just one caption. Sometimes, you clean house at sea. That single post got over 17,000 reactions in 48 hours. People noticed. So did former business partners, old friends, and a few high-level names in my old network. But I stayed quiet, because revenge isn't loud. It's paperwork, filed on time, delivered with precision. They tried to erase me. So now, I was erasing them from my accounts, from my assets, from the life they thought they owned. And I was just getting started. The probate hearing wasn't supposed to be a big deal, at least not to them. They thought it would be another quiet checkmate. Just some signatures. A few tears. A nod from the judge. And control over my estate handed to them on a silver platter. They had no idea I was coming. I showed up in person. With Elaine by my side and 3 bankers' boxes of documented proof. Brian looked like he'd seen a ghost. Madison wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge, Honorable Linda Martinez, was sharp, calm, focused. She opened with a simple question, "Is Mr. Bellamy present?" Elaine stood. "He is, Your Honor, fully competent and ready to testify." For the next hour, we laid out the case. Elaine spoke with the clarity of a scalpel, presented the timeline, the medication tampering, the forged signatures, the fraudulent filings, the fake diagnoses, every transaction, every login, every name. Then I spoke. I wasn't angry. I wasn't theatrical. I just told the truth. About the years I spent building something from nothing. About the sacrifices. About trusting the wrong people for the right reasons. And how it felt to watch my own daughter treat me like an obstacle to be managed instead of a father to be honored. When I finished, you could hear the courtroom breathing. Judge Martinez took a long pause, then said, "There is no credible evidence this man lacks capacity. What I do see is a coordinated effort to exploit and isolate him. The court finds in favor of Mr. Patient Bellamy. Conservatorship is denied. The petition is dismissed with prejudice." I didn't smile, but I did breathe. Brian tried to speak. The judge cut him off. "We are not finished," she said. "There are additional matters under review." And just like that, the doors opened. 2 officers stepped in. Brian wasn't arrested, not that day, but he was formally served with notice of the pending criminal investigation. Outside the courthouse, reporters were already gathering. Somehow the video from Soho House had made its rounds. People wanted answers. Brian tried to rush past the cameras. Madison paused. "Dad," she said quietly. "Can we talk?" I looked at her. My only child. The same girl I'd rocked to sleep. Driven to piano lessons. Lifted up when the world felt too heavy. And for the first time, I didn't recognize her. She handed me a folded letter and walked away. 3 pages. Apologies. Justifications. Promises. I didn't reply. Because some bridges don't burn in one day. They crumble over years of silence, secrecy, and choices that can't be undone. That night, I returned home. The Newport house, still legally mine, felt cold but clean. I poured a glass of wine. Saturday by the window. Opened my laptop and uploaded one final video to the HOA Facebook group, How to Spot the Warning Signs of Financial Elder Abuse. It went viral. Within 24 hours, I had over 300 messages. Neighbors, retirees, sons and daughters, all telling stories they'd never said out loud. Apparently, I wasn't the only one, and maybe that's what hurt the most. Not that it happened, but that it happened so often. Still, justice had been served. Brian lost his contract with the digital agency. The bar complaint against Carter's replacement sustained. His license was revoked. The fake doctor who'd signed off on my evaluation indicted for fraud 2 weeks later. As for Madison, she went silent. For once, she didn't call, didn't text. She knew the door was closed. Maybe not forever, but for now, firmly. Because forgiveness is not the same as access. And family, at its core, is built on trust. Break that, and all you're left with is paperwork. 6 months have passed since the hearing. Life feels lighter now. I still live in the Newport house. But it's not just walls and memories. It's a sanctuary I share with people who value trust, Maria drops by every Sunday for coffee. Elaine and I check in once a month. Sometimes, we host dinners with neighbors who've become close friends. We talk. We laugh. We move forward. I've learned something important. Boundaries outrank blood. Family is chosen as much as it's given. Looking back, you don't regret defending myself. I regret not doing it sooner. Would you have pressed charges if you were me? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if this story meant something to you. You deserve respect and protection. At every age.